Welcome, everyone. This is Greg Rock, and I'd like to welcome you to our 2016 webcast series. As you know, BPM Institute provides education, training, and certification for BPM practitioners throughout their careers. And one of our favorite activities here at the Institute is sharing best practices and case studies. And so we were thrilled when the folks at Joyce Meyer Ministries and PNMSoft offered to come talk about some of the things they've accomplished over the last couple years. Joyce Meyer Ministries is a non-for-profit organization, and I know we have many of those throughout the community. But many of the things they were able to tackle, I think, are applicable to all BPM organizations, especially those that are trying to figure out how to get started and how to have some quick wins early on in the process. Joyce Meyer Ministries provides humanitarian aid and missions relief throughout the world. In 2014, they provided over 31 million meals, supporting feeding centers in 33 countries, and over 1.6 patients have been treated through JMM's medical and dental efforts. They've done quite a bit of work around BPM. After a ramp-up time to do research internally on the processes that were critical to the organization, their initial internal work identified approximately 30 processes and things that would benefit from implementing a BPM suite. They chose to focus initially on optimizing a process that was very manual and labor-intensive. It was cutting across 5 departments, a call center, and a slew of external vendors. And this was a process that was critical to securing funds and sustaining operations. And so the purpose of today's webcast is to learn about how Joyce Meyer Ministries automated mission-critical processes with BPM. And we're thrilled to have Angela Triplett with us, who is Business Process Strategist with Joyce Meyers Ministry. And I'm going to turn things over to Joyce, but we're also going to have a second presenter with us today, Jesse Bertier from PNMSoft, who's going to take us through a quick demo of some of the solutions that were used at JMM. So with that, welcome, Angela.
Well, thank you, Greg. I really appreciate you asking to speak here, and it's really an honor. So I just want to share a little bit about JMM. So we use JMM just as short for Joyce Meyer Ministry. Joyce started about 40 years ago and is now one of the world's leading practical Bible teachers. She is a #1 New York bestseller Time author with over 100 books. And we are located, our headquarters, right here in Fenton, Missouri. We have 9 international offices and 24 field offices. And just to get a magnitude of what we do here, our mission is really to share Christ and love people, and how we do that is through media outreaches. So we have a daily broadcast that's translated in 80 languages on over 1,000 TV and radio stations. And that takes quite a bit of bandwidth and power. We also have 4 million monthly visits on our website, and that's really looking at our shows and reading our devotions. Just on the social network side, we have 12.4 million followers on Facebook and Twitter. The emails coming in, we answer about 27,000 emails every month, and calls, we take in over 75,000 calls monthly. So as you can see, it's not just a small nonprofit. We are global. We also have 12 conferences that in the U.S., and then we do a couple international conferences as well. Our Hand of Hope outreach, just as Greg had mentioned, really is looking at, we have a Dream Center in St. Louis. We have feeding programs and medical missions and children's homes and disaster relief and prison ministries, and we look at human trafficking and water relief and classrooms for kids who have no schools. And so we really, like I said, are all about sharing Christ and loving people through different venues. And that's really important about what we do as from a humanitarian standpoint. So moving on to how we got into business processes. We identified and just did a real big brainstorm on all of our different business processes here at JMM, and we identified over 30 business processes that we could improve efficiency through increased visibility, to reduce labor costs or increase revenues. And so some of those processes were one that we're going to talk about today that we actually did automate through Sequence, but our contract process or our new hires and terms. We have form approvals. We have sign-ups for our volunteers who work at our conferences. We have deploy readiness, and we have license renewals. So those are some of the other processes that we looked at, just some of the top ones. Our CSO attended the Gartner BPM Summit in December of 2014, and that's where she was able to meet with PNMSoft and really look at them as a vendor and, of course, looked at some of the other vendors, but PNMSoft really came out ahead of everyone else. And the reason we chose PNMSoft is because of, one, they had such a user-friendly interface. It was very easy and intuitive. I'm going to talk a little bit about training later on. Two, the ability to create and implement a process without needing technical resources, that is huge for us. We have a number of technical resources working on various projects, but the need to be able to have a business user actually create a business process and implement it without technicals is just streamlining and giving them the ability to make changes and streamline even further and do their analysis is just huge for being able to save money and make changes very quickly. And third, the price fit our budget. So it was a great price point, and they were the winners. And so next, if we can look at our first process to automate, it actually was one of the most complex processes that we had to work with. It has to do with our expired and declined credit card transactions for reoccurring donations. So we have partners who donate on a monthly basis, and just like everyone's credit cards, they expire, or we run the transaction and it declines. And so we need to be reactive to that because that directly affects our monthly revenue. And so really the purpose of this process is to obtain updated credit card information so that we can have successful transactions. And this process is a 5-week process, and if we don't get a hold of that person and obtain an updated credit card, before we automated this process, the whole entire process included 6 attempted calls, an email, and 3 letters. And that might seem excessive, but keep in mind, this is not just this month's transaction. It affects all the following. So it's a large chunk of money when we have a declined or a expired credit card and do not obtain that for future transactions. The other complexity about this process is that we have 3 categories based on the level of giving, and if it's a first-time donation, if it's the first time we're running the transaction. So it's quite a different dimension, several ways and levels. And so after looking at this and flowing this process out with PNM, it took us about 5 months to go live, and our go-live day was November 1st of 2015. And that was a really big day for us. And moving on, we absolutely had challenges. You never implement something without having challenges, especially when it's your first process. But before we automated this, some of the challenges just with the manual process was our data wasn't up to date. And we actually used Excel spreadsheets to manually manage the process. And so you can see when you manually manage a process, of course, people make mistakes, and you're not going to follow a person all the way through 5 weeks of a process without making mistakes. So we saw that every declined or expired transaction was not actually getting through the process 100% of the time. And so it was definitely a loss of revenue if we couldn't obtain these credit cards. And then, of course, reporting capabilities was very difficult because we have multiple calls, we have multiple letters going out and emails, and if everything is tracked manually, you're looking at Excel spreadsheets, you're looking at different codes in our ERP system. It was just really difficult to obtain great metrics based on what we had to work with. So it just wasn't easy to look at, even to look at improving, because the data was in different areas and manual. And it took a really long time to change anything in the process because of the analytics was so time-consuming to even gather and put together using the various ways of data. And so that's what we had to work with. We had this complex process. It was 100% manual, and we used Sequence then to be able to automate this, and we were super excited as we implemented this, as I said, on November 1st of 2015, and PNMSoft actually really helped us through the flow, understanding our process, and then being able to implement. They asked really great questions on the variances of the scenarios for this. And so moving on to project achievements, once we were able to automate with Sequence and go live, we were able to reduce our labor in our outbound calling. So before Sequence, it actually took a representative approximately 4 minutes per call, and today they've reduced that down to 3 minutes per call. And one of the reasons for that is the user interface is so simple and so easy to use. The number of total calls made also was reduced, and the reason for that is because 100% of each of those transactions are going through the process. So if we can actually get a hold of our partner early on, they don't have to go through the 5-week process. So we're saving money if we can get a hold of them in that first or second call rather than taking them through the entire process. So as you can see, just the labor alone in the reduced calls and the reduced amount of time per call is significant for us. We also were able to reduce labor in sending outbound emails. So before Sequence, we had to extract a report, send it over, and it went through a third-party email provider. And today, the emails actually come directly out of Sequence. Not one person actually touches that. It's all automated. So we saved money there as well. And then we were also able to reduce costs in printing and shipping letters. So during the process of implementing Sequence, we actually had a third-party vendor printing our letters for us. And we actually brought that in-house, and out of BPM, it actually creates a PDF of each of those letters, and our distribution center prints those and mails those out. That is another significant cost for our ministry. And then just alone, being able to obtain credit card information so that we can continue to obtain those funds month after month. That is where the true cost comes in of increasing revenue, because in the past that would have just been lost revenue if we did not obtain a new credit card. And so now when we are able to obtain the credit card information, we can continue those donations coming in on the months following that missed transaction. Originally, when we estimated, we were potentially doing a cost savings of 67%. So we looked at how much labor it was costing us just to manage this process, with also the labor around the emails and printing the letters for the vendor. And then after Sequence, we had estimated that 67% savings, and that's huge for us. We are still in the process of doing a cost analysis for the actual savings. Not sure it's going to be 67%, but it's not going to be too far off that. So we're really excited about that. Because this is a 5-week process, it's taking just a little bit of time to go back and actually gather enough data to do a true cost analysis. All right, so what are some lessons learned that we have for you and some best practice advice? Because this was a very complex process that we started with. One, because it was our first process, the business process owner responsibilities really weren't defined right up front. We just jumped right in. I'm the business process strategist, so I led the effort. And when we were all finished, excuse me, we had a business owner who was going to take this on as the business process owner. And because this is new for us, really had to work with what the responsibilities were going to be for that person to maintain this and continue to analyze it and move forward with any changes that were necessary and recommendations. So that was new for us within the organization, within operations, for us to do that. So I would just say be prepared for that, to have someone be able to own it after you implement it. I talked about this early, training. So our call center reps who actually are using the flow time front end of this, their training really took about 15 minutes. It's very intuitive. It looks like a web page, and we just showed it to them, and they were off and running. So this was one of the reasons we purchased from PNMSoft, and it really proved out during the training of our 45 call center reps. One of the lessons learned we had was the timing of our developer training. So PNM looks at developers not as so much technical developers, but developers of who actually creates the processes in sequence. And so we actually had training done, and we did it a little too soon, where, you know, when you have training, if you don't use training within 24 to 48 hours, you actually lose that. And our training actually got lost because we did it a little too soon in the game. So I would just recommend that you time your training closer to when those developers are actually going to be using sequence and able to build it. So we've actually been able to go back and look at our training materials and get caught back up. It just, the timing was just a little off for us. Internal IT support efforts, you know, we just had minimal initially in the implementation. After that, we really we didn't need our internal IT resources. So that's one of the benefits for using sequence. And we really like it. For dashboard planning. So, you know, we always push off reports. You know you need to do them, but they're the last thing you usually do. And we were so focused on getting the process right, training the end users, testing, and we kept saying, we're going to get the reports. We know what they are. We know the dashboards. Well, because our processes were a little more, this one was so complex, our dashboards are a little more complex. So we went live with just minimal dashboards, and now we are having to go back and make some more complex ones so that we can actually see the success of the process in each state that it's in. So we have all these activities, and we want to see how successful each of those activities are. And so it's a little more detailed. And so just don't forget about that, is I would recommend. And then, you know, the question always is, do you start with the most complex business process or a simple process to get a quick win? And we actually decided to start out with the most complex and engage PNMSoft's resources to help us, and it was a huge success. We could not have done that without them, and so it's really a choice and within your organization whether you choose a quick win or a complex for a big win. Now we're able to do some quick wins with sequence and much easier processes. So for us, the large complex process was a huge win for us, and that's the way we chose to go. So I don't have a recommendation for you. It's just something to think about on if you are going to engage PNM with a very complex or choose to do a smaller process, simple process, and get some simple wins. And skipped one. Always flow out your process first. And PNM will tell you to do that as well. Consider exceptions. You know, you try always to think of every scenario. But flow it out. Have users look at the process that are actually in the process and a part of the process, because they will give you scenarios that you might not have thought of. And then lastly, expect changes. When you are automating a process, it's new. There will be something that we probably forgot. And because sequence is so easy to change, it's okay, but just expect that. This is not a typical waterfall. I would not approach this as a waterfall project when you implement. And but the good thing about it, like I said, is it's so easy to change that you can do that. So next, where are we going? Where are we headed from here? We went live. We're doing cost analysis. We're starting to do some smaller processes to get some more quick wins. And as I had said, we're creating our reports and dashboards to dig further into our current process and get better analytics out of it so that we can make some business decisions to where we can further refine our process and save a little more money. We're also looking at integrating Sequence with our CRM. It's called Studio Enterprise. It's actually for nonprofits. So we're going to be doing that, and we're looking at also to integrate into Office 365 SharePoint. So we have quite a few things that we do with Office 365, and we want to integrate it with that. So with the help of PNM, we're looking to partner with them to do that. We also are using PNM or Sequence to create forms for collecting information. We have a large data warehouse, and we have several business users that enter data, and a lot of times they just create spreadsheets. And so we're looking at creating some forms where they can enter the data, and then it will go into our data warehouse and display out on our dashboards. And so that, for us, the many different data points that people have on Excel spreadsheets, and I know we're not alone in that, for the source, the person who actually has the true data, to be able to use a form, enter it in, and then that can filtrate out, and we can put it where it needs to be, whether it's on a report, a dashboard, is available. So we're actually using that right now today. And then, of course, as I said, we had started with 30. We have brainstormed 30 ideas. Of course, that list is growing now that they see what Sequence is able to do. So we are looking to implement several other identified processes. So there you have it. That's how we have implemented Sequence and what we're doing with our first very large process and where we're going from here. And so now I will turn it over to Jesse, and he can share with you all about PNM.
All right, Angela, thank you very much. And we'll switch gears now, and I'll turn things over to Jesse Bertier.
Thank you, Greg. So a little bit about PNMSoft. We've been around for about 20 years. We focus solely 100% on BPM software. So that's the only thing we do. Therefore, we specialize in business process management software and solutions. Our platform, Sequence, is an intelligent BPM suite. It's recognized by Gartner on their Magic Quadrant for iBPMSs, and also by Forrester in their low-code and BPM platforms for digital business research papers. So we have a stellar track record of successful implementations, and we're the only BPM vendor with hot change architecture, and hot change supports the complex global projects that we deliver. So we work with some of the world's biggest brands, and those include some of our customers, they come in various sizes and industries. Some have certain suitability for integrating Internet of Things or IoT devices. So a wide variety of customer implementations. So for example, if we look at OSER, who is a Gartner BPM Excellence award-winning customer, OSER manufactures prosthetic limbs and is based out of Iceland. And then we also have a customer, Harris Caprock, and Harris Caprock is a satellite telecommunications service provider. And they really specialize in providing telecommunication services in some of the most remote areas of the world. So, for example, you'd have the need in areas such as the middle of the ocean, places where traditional telecommunications are not available. We won't delve any deeper into specific customer stories today, but we do have a good selection available on PNMSoft.com. Okay, so let's jump right into our demo. So what I'm going to show today is how easy it is for our business users, and we use the term developer a little bit differently than you might think. Developer in terms of a process modeler, and perhaps somebody that's involved in integrating systems together from a business and technical perspective. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and open up the Business Process Application Development Studio. We call this the App Studio part of Sequence. And what this is think of it very similar to Microsoft Visio type design canvas where you could drag and drop various activities and swim lanes onto the design canvas to model a business process. So what I'd like to do is just very quickly model out a process for a call center for customer care. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and drag on a swim lane to indicate, best practice for BPM notation and or modeling would be to have some swim lanes to, contain some of the various activities that we'll be placing on the canvas. So in this example, I'm going to have two swim lanes. So one will be for the call center, who is primarily responsible for fielding service calls or calls from customers or exceptions, that might come up via email, etc. Then I'll add another swim lane, and that swim lane will be primarily dedicated to the customer care center itself, the actual resources involved in basically, handling the day-to-day issues that may come up for customers. So I'm going to go ahead and label those as such, just so we have a good, clear understanding of which resource group is going to be handling which activities. So as you can see, I'm just using the basic skills for modeling, similar again to Visio, very simple environment. So we always have a start and an end to any business process. So we'll go ahead and start in the call center and hopefully end in successful completion of the customer care case. So I'll go ahead and create an activity here, and I'll really create a container in the BPM notation here. And this container serves a couple of purposes. One, it lets a business process designer or modeler really kind of stay focused at the business level, at the process level, and not get too involved with the details, the technical details of what might happen in the call center. So for example, we'll have a new call received, or a new case, I should say, and we can go ahead and label as such. And I don't type and talk very well at the same time, so there may be a few pauses. So I'll go ahead and drag in a new case container, and then I'll go ahead and drag in maybe an actual case resolution. So this would involve somebody perhaps from the engineering team, maybe somebody from the account management team, but for now we're going to call that case resolution. And then one thing you'll notice is we could very quickly and easily model or connect, I should say, the various activities on the canvas. So I'm going to go ahead and join all these up together in just a few clicks. And we have our very basic, simple process diagram. So there are a couple of other things that you can do. Obviously, there are quite a few activities here on the left that are available to me. So I didn't get too much into the integration points or some of the more technical capabilities of sequence just yet. So now that we have our process defined at a very high level, what I can do is I can actually drill down on some of these activities, and I could start to fill out kind of some of the more technical, maybe some of the more detailed pieces of the process. This feature we call dual view. So in sequence with dual view, what we can do is we can have business users or process modelers defining the process from kind of a high-level diagram, and working with the business team, perhaps more technical resources can drill into these activities or containers and fill out the integrations, fill out the forms or the tasks or the activities, messages, etc. And they can work collaboratively on the same model at the same time. So the ability to fill in these details on these activities is key for keeping things quite simple and organized. So going to the new case, if I drill down here and I look further into what type of activity I might consider, we may start with a form as far as a human interaction. The form would be, think of it as like an intake form. So if the call center had a service rep on the line and the customer is reporting an issue, that call center rep would be typing into a form to capture some critical information about what the problem might be. So dragging the human activity for a form onto the canvas allows me to use sequence to create an interactive form. And again, we're talking about low code here, so what I'm about to show may be a little bit technical, but it's not too technical. It doesn't require a developer per se, but it does require somebody with a little bit of user experience design capability. So what I'll go ahead and do is label this the intake form. And this wizard-like interface kind of guides the user, the sequence developer, through the process. And many times it's a 1 or 2 page wizard. Other times it may be a little bit more. But the idea is that it guides the user through a series of questions or configuration settings to get to the end result, which is in many cases a complete activity, which may involve a form, it may involve a message, it may involve a web service, for example. So in this case, I can create a new form, but one of the benefits of Sequence is having the ability to reuse forms, perhaps templates, from other business processes. So you can very quickly build upon what had been created before. So that is very helpful in branding or creating various interfaces one time and then reusing them over and over again. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and duplicate a form that I've already created previously. So what I have the ability to do is go into my form templates and then just select a customer request form. And oftentimes what you'll find with business processes is you have many forms that kind of share common fields so that you can reuse those forms over and over again. So now that I've selected my form as a template, again, oftentimes I have the customer name, maybe the account owner, the request date, the request type, and maybe some information about the service team for that account. And these fields will be filled in a bit later. I also automatically included some documents here in my template. Documents, in many cases, follow the business process through the various steps. So the screen we're seeing here is part of Sequence's UX Studio. It's similar to the design canvas for the modeling of the process, the business process, with the exception here that I can start to add fields and various interactive form objects, drop downs, check boxes, date pickers, the typical interface components that you expect to see in a form. So again, it's all browse, drag, and very simple to navigate. So if I wanted to add some additional fields, in this case, I'm going to go ahead and add cost. We'll be using this field later on in the business process. So what I'm doing is I'm using the point-and-click interface here to relabel my field label. So I can go ahead and call this cost. And then for cost, I will drag in a text box, and I will actually put this in the correct location. And since this is a new field, I have the ability to connect it to my data model. And I'll select a type of currency because we'd expect that to be a dollar amount. So again, Sequence handles the behind-the-scenes data model, so you don't have to be a data modeling expert. And now that I've added my field for cost, I can go ahead and save that form. And I've created my very first user interactive form. I'll go ahead and connect that to the model. And let's go ahead and finish that process up. And then drilling into the case resolution step here. So we finished the intake of a new case. We'll go ahead and look at case resolution. Again, using dual view, I'm drilling down into that activity or that container. And I'll go ahead and put in a task. And the task may simply be an alert that goes to a particular resource. So for example, in this case, we'll say that this is customer case resolution. And a task comprises of a message and a form, typically. And we'll go ahead and, instead of reusing an existing form, we have the ability to, in Sequence, display a variety of templates that are more basic, that aren't necessarily branded, but you can begin to really customize, again, what's on that form. So I'll go ahead and save that. I won't fill that out just yet. Before we assign the task to a particular resource, one of the things we may want to do is we may want to look at the cost. So for example, we may want approval before we begin the resolution of the case. So for example, if I put a business rule in here, to look at cost. I'm going to go ahead and build a rule. We'll say that if a cost exceeds $500, we'll be looking for approval. So in sequence, part of the low-code design here is we oftentimes look at business rules with very basic fields, comparisons, Boolean logic, and sequence is providing a very simple way for us to build an expression. So for example, if I look at the intake form, I look at cost, and I can type in if the cost is greater than $500, and that becomes my business rule. So if the cost does exceed $500, I'm going to create a task for approval before we begin. Go ahead and label that accordingly. And this time I'm going to pick a pre-built template. Again, approval forms are something that's very common in a business process. So rather than build one from scratch, I'll pull one from another workflow. And this time I'll select approval. And it's similar to the process that we saw before, the form that we saw before. The exception here is that I have an approve or reject and comments. And I can also connect to a previous view of the customer information. So for example, if I go to the customer service request, I look at the intake form, and I want to grab a copy of a view of the customer information. I can do that in sequence very easily. So we're reusing views from previous forms because whoever's doing the review is most likely going to want to know a little bit about the customer, the cost, and any documents that might have been attached to the process in the intake form. So I'm going to bring in a copy of the documents as well for the reviewer to see. So quickly I'm building upon forms that have been created in a previous step. I'll go ahead and save that form. And now I have an approval step. So let's wire this up together. I'll connect these activities. And this approval would be if the cost exceeds $500. We're looking for approval. Otherwise, we can begin the task. I'll wire that up. If we don't need approval, we can skip that step and go right to the task at hand. So very quickly, filling in the details of the process, and then ultimately when we've completed the task, we've ended that step. We've ended that container, that section, or that activity. So very quickly I'm able to model, both from a high level and from a detail level, a business process. One of the things we may look at is the approval step. For example, may require a connection to an ERP system, for example, because based on the person that I may be assigning that approval step to, I may need approval. I may have different approval levels, I should say. So for example, consistent with the low-code methodology of sequence, I have the ability to connect to, say, a web service, and that web service may be, for example, an ERP system. So in this case, I'll go ahead and bring in a WCF or web service connector. And if I double-click, again, we'll see the wizard-like interface. So we'll call this our ERP system. And I'll go ahead and select from an existing ERP system that we have, an ERP service. Sequence connects to that service. I can get the approval level given the current user simply by clicking on the wizard, selecting fields from my process that I have in a previous step, or any activity, I should say. So for example, I can look at whoever created the ticket. We can look at that for approval, or maybe the manager. In this case, I'll just say whoever entered the ticket. Do they have the authority to make that change? So I can connect to my business rule. Let's just move this over here. So I can change this business rule and say, does the cost exceed $500, and do I have enough authority? And the way I would do that is I'd look at the result from my ERP web service call, and I'd look at the return value, for example, and make sure that I have a return value greater than or equal to the $500. So very quickly you can see how we're keeping with the low-code theme and providing a wizard-like interface for connections such as web services and other interfaces. So very quickly, again, going through the process, we have a complete model. And Sequence allows you to use the process lab to step through and walk through the process and simulate and see how that process is actually going and if it needs optimization, et cetera. So what I'd like to do now is shift over to flow time, which is our end user interface. And in a call center environment, you may have the case where you have a high volume of cases coming in, maybe multiple call centers or multiple resource centers or groups that can handle those calls coming in or those cases that would be resulting from the calls coming in. And a new feature in Sequence is Hot Operations. And Hot Operations is an extension to Sequence for operation managers and team leaders. And I have both of those roles. So I'm going to go in as the operations manager. And what this is doing is giving me an overview of my operation teams. I have 3 teams. I have one in Israel, I have one in the UK, and one in the United States. And we can very quickly see the volume of cases coming in, what the SLA is, am I responding to those cases quick enough, what my current workload is, what my closure rate is, et cetera. And very quickly on this dashboard, I have the ability to monitor my SLA compliance, my cost, and make sure that both are in line with the business's expectations. So jumping over to work allocation, one of the things an operations manager is often tasked with is shifting priorities, shifting cases from one call center, for example, or service center to another to try to keep the SLA in line, try to keep the costs in line. So the first thing you can see here is unallocated work coming in on the left. Maybe these are exceptions. Sequence has the ability to automatically assign to groups and resources based on roles, based on experience, et cetera. And quickly you can see that it's actually a little bit overloaded. They have about 32 hours in overload here. So we need to shift some requests over to a different center to make sure that our SLAs stay in line. So by using Sequence's drag and drop capability in Hot Operations, I can very quickly bring in my resource allocation to an acceptable level to meet my SLAs. So we can very quickly see that the resources are now right in line with what I would expect without overloading any one of them, and I can start allocating work that's coming in from the call center and monitoring those resources, monitoring the number of hours, and then making sure that the cost is, again, in line with the business's expectations. So that feature of Hot Operations in Sequence allows the operations manager to do that very quickly, to do that very easily. And then the similar example for a team leader is the same or similar example. The exception here is that as a manager of a team, I have the same interface, except I can manage my work assignment within the individuals, amongst the individuals that I have in my team. So I could very quickly see who's overloaded, who needs to be relieved of some of the tasks, and who can help out and keep the SLAs in line. And that's all I have for the Sequence demo.
All right, Jesse. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate it. And let me just switch gears here. I did want to mention to folks that what PNMSoft was good enough to show us today was a couple examples of their interface. I think these days folks are used to using lots of interfaces, web-based, and so certainly they look like they've done their work on the front end of that. But there's a whole host of demos and different scenarios that they're happy to set up and demo for you, depending on what your specific needs are. And so following this webcast, you can request a demo for your own organization by going to pnmsoft.com/getdemo. And they've got folks that are standing by to go ahead and get you scheduled up if you'd like to see how they might be able to assist you as they have assisted JMM here. And so, Jesse Birdie, thank you so much for representing PNMSoft and their product. And I especially wanted to thank Angela Triplett and the folks from Joyce Meyer Ministries in sharing their story as they begin their BPM journey. It's one of those questions, Angela, I get all the time from folks about how we can get started, and they know that they're not working in the most efficient way possible. Not every organization has such a clear picture of what their mission, but you guys are doing a lot of great work helping people all around the globe, and so we're thrilled that you were able to meet up with PNMSoft and have a winning relationship here in order to run things more efficiently going forward. So thanks again for sharing your story, and hopefully you'll keep us updated as things progress.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's been great. It's been a lot of fun.
All right. Thank you so much. And to our members, keep your eye out for additional webcasts coming throughout the year with a lot of the leading authors in the space releasing new books and some additional case studies. But for both PNMSoft and JMM, I want to thank you both very much, and we look forward to hosting everyone on a future webcast. Bye-bye now.